back to Coffee Talk with Brandy. Today I have my new friend I just met, Curt, who's joining us and who's going to share a little bit of his story, and we're going to dive into that in just a moment. If you're new here, please feel free to subscribe and hang out. We really talk about life and just life in general and things that are really of importance. And my biggest thing is really teaching people or giving people the space to become self-aware. Because self-awareness, in my perspective, is the key to moving forward and a key to living life fully and present. So, funny story, Curt and I were out, well, we didn't know each other. We're out hiking with our dogs and we ran into each other. And I think one of the most beautiful things ever is when people come to spaces genuine and they show up and you're just real and you're not holding back thoughts. Because that's what Curt and I are like. And so we ended up in this deep conversation on this hike, and I had invited him to come here to the talk show because he was so interesting. And he shared a lot of his story with me just about becoming self-aware. So Curt, thank you so much for coming to the show. Welcome.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that you're here. And we were just talking before the camera rolls about the fact that we're nervous. And
yes,
yeah.
I haven't done this before.
Yeah, well, and I've done it quite a bit, but I'm still nervous, so. And what?
I usually get over my nervousness when we start, so I still got a little bit of that, but I just don't want to come across as, too much of this or too much of that.
Aw.
So it's that kind of thing, but I'm fine. We'll go wherever we need to go.
Well, you were fantastic, so just be you, and
Okay.
You know what? Just be guided by your own intuition.
Right.
And anything, if you say something you don't want on air, there's edit, right? Like, I am learning my editing skills, so just be mindful.
Then it wouldn't be so genuine, so we'll have to keep everything in.
Exactly. Well, Curt, one of the things that we started talking about was really becoming self-aware on this hike, and we'll dive into Gabor Mate in a little bit, but tell us, what was it like before you started to do some work to become self-aware? Do you remember what that was like?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. It's been a long journey, and you know how life goes. You have your ups and downs and your successes and your failures. And my first marriage was a failure. I couldn't figure out why it was a failure. And then all these pieces came into focus last year. And it started last year around, I think it was February or March, April, somewhere around that time, where I had this really deep, severe pain in my shoulder blade that went right through my body. It seemed like an arrow or a spear was thrown into my back. And I couldn't get this relief. And as a chiropractor, I tried everything. I tried balls and laying on balls and stretching and exercise and everything that I knew how to adjust. I went to a chiropractor to get adjusted, didn't help. Went to an acupuncturist, went to medical doctors. They did MRIs and CAT scans and they couldn't find anything, and went to physical therapy. That didn't help at all. So as the months went on, I couldn't sleep. I couldn't sleep during that time. It was maybe 5 months of this before I went to the acupuncturist, and I started to get relief from the acupuncturist.
Oh,
so coming from a Western consciousness in medicine, even as a chiropractor, I studied meridian therapy and acupuncture and some of the esoteric energy type of treatments. We had the best technique, which is bioenergetic synchronization technique, that I was good at. And contact reflexology, I did that. So lots of muscle testing and things like that, applied kinesiology. So I was aware of some of these esoteric type of treatments, these aids to health and staying healthy, a holistic approach more.
Yeah.
And yet I was more scientifically minded. And when I couldn't figure this out and no one else could figure it out, and then acupuncture finally helped it a lot, I started delving into all these techniques more. As I did that, I became aware of being centered and focused, mindfulness, staying in the moment, staying in the present, not living in the past or the future. And living in the past or the future is sort of based on fear or anticipation, rather than you're living in another time. You're actually have the fears of the worst thing you can think of. Yeah. And usually, like Dr. Mate was saying, we all evaluate ourselves in the worst possible way. Yeah. We're harder on ourselves than we are on anybody else. And another thing that I came to realize is when you're hard on yourself and very sensitive, you take things personally.
Yeah.
Which I have done all my life. Is a very sensitive person. I get hurt easier than others if I get ridiculed or if there's a negative, someone has a critique, I'm going, why? What is behind that? I'm too much overthinking everything. My wife keeps saying, you're overthinking everything.
Well, overthinking, if I can interrupt just for a second, is actually our mind trying to make sense of the world around us.
Exactly.
And it kind of has a negative connotation. Oh, stop overthinking. But it's really our brain trying to grasp like what's going on. So the big question you just had asked yourself was, what's going on within me?
Yes.
Yeah.
And another thing is, after you retire, all of a sudden you have all this time.
Yeah.
And you fill it with thinking about what you were here for, what you weren't here for, what did you do with yourself, how did you live your life, and now it's done. So I'm thinking death's near around the corner. I'm thinking, what have I really accomplished? I get into this deep depression. This was before the pain in my back. I was deep depression. So for the first time I reached out. Being a chiropractor, I don't like to take medicines. I'm very resistant on it, but I took an antidepressant for that and another one to sleep better because I couldn't get any sleep before this. So those two things calmed me down and made me feel better about myself, so I weaned myself off that. Yeah. But as I start delving down this road, I'm starting to read books. And one of the books that influenced me the most was The 4 Agreements.
Oh, yeah.
I love that book. And I started thinking in terms of our senses. And if you shut off one sense, the other senses are piqued more. Mm-hmm. If you're blind, you can hear better.
Yeah.
So your other senses are piqued. And touch is the first sense you ever have as a child, pre-birth. You don't see anything, you don't hear anything mostly. It's mostly touch.
Yeah.
And touch is so important for us as humans. We would die without it.
It is.
As babies. And certainly, as you go through life, you need it. And as you get older, I think you need more of it. Mm-hmm. But we get less in our culture. Not more, we get less.
The autonomy that people push in our culture is awful. The I'm going to do it myself and I don't need anybody. But that's also a trauma response, right?
Right.
It really is.
And we don't value our elderly as much as other cultures do. Some of the other cultures do. And that's, it makes you feel like you're discarded. Mm-hmm. Now, Dr. Mate mentioned this a lot.
Yeah.
Mate?
I say Mate, but it's okay.
He mentioned this a lot. And when you sent that to me, it was just perfect what I needed at the time.
Yeah, it was the one on authenticity, right?
Yes.
I will attach that here for anybody who might be interested. But Dr. Mate and the authenticity video is amazing. Anyway, go ahead.
Well, it was just amazing to me because I realized at that point, thinking back into my old childhood, how patterns repeat themselves over and over. And I'm so sensitive to ridicule or pain or criticism or not being good enough.
Yeah. And
everybody's problem narrowed down to that. Mm-hmm. You don't think you're good enough. You're not quite living up to someone else's expectations, especially your parents and your siblings and your pastor at church. You're always trying to please others. And you've been domesticated into a belief system that is not your own.
Yes.
It doesn't come from within, it comes from outside, and you're just trying to please others. You lose the sense of yourself. And over time, and I think religion does this to a lot of people, and the more conservative, legalistic types of religions are I think, the most damaging, because it gets to the psyche. It tells you you're really depraved. You deserve hell. My church said this. And so you're never good enough. You can't be good enough no matter what you try.
And you're walking on eggshells constantly.
And so you're constantly trying to please everybody, and you can't please anybody enough. So you get down on yourself, and you start to judge others according to the same way you judge yourself. And as I started realizing this, I'm seeing that I'm responsible for my own feelings. I always thought people were doing things to me.
It's a response, though.
It's a response.
And it's a response that is there from our childhood.
And it's not based on reality. It's based on perception that is off, that is not real.
Well, it was a reality at the time, right?
Oh, yeah, it's real enough to you.
Yeah, we create those survival strategies.
Yeah.
So as in that Dr. Mate talks about, we're all born with authenticity. We have to have authenticity to survive. Without it, we would die, because if a baby doesn't cry when they're hungry or they need to be fed, or, well, hungry, fed, same thing, but a wet diaper, when they're scared, if we don't have that as a baby, our needs will not be met. So that authenticity, that gut instinct is innate within us. But then what happens, as Dr. Mate so beautifully explains in so many of his videos, is that parents, and it's not about shifting blame or blaming parents. It's about, the acknowledgement of growing up in societies that are stress induced or unsafe and all of these things. His mom was a good mom. She could not attune to his needs because he was born in Budapest, Hungary, right as the invasion of the Nazis, right? So you have these things going on in life. And so when a mother is at distress, the baby notices the mother's distress. And we, as children, as babies, will naturally drop our authenticity in order to keep that attachment. Because if we notice our parents are more stressed, the yelling happens, or whatever happens in your home, the more we lose our sense of who we are, and then we live our lives according to what people are telling us, as you were just saying. Like, we lose that sense of self. And so you're discovering that just in this last year. And
I think our search for ourself is so deep. It's sort of like our search for God or meaning in life and our purpose in life. And so we're always searching for something outside of ourselves, and it's really inside of ourselves, and we're not looking inwardly, we're looking outwardly. And I think that's what blinds us to going in the proper direction. So I took a different course, and as I took that different course, I started feeling that, I don't want to get too esoteric.
Sure.
But that the universe was working with me, not against me.
Yeah, it's a mind shift.
Yes, and you start seeing synchronicities.
Yeah.
And the day before I met you, I went to sleep that night, and I was depressed. My daughter was not communicating to me well, and I didn't understand why or what was happening, and I was depressed about it. And there's nothing I could do from my end. And I'm thinking, is it her or is it me? Why is this? Why am I not able to fix this? And I just needed a message, so I just pray, because that's what I'm familiar with.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily pray to God. I'm praying to anything out there, whatever, because I'm not sure.
The energy.
Right. And so I just, give me a message, give me a direction, give me something to go on. I need an answer to get through this. And I take the dog up for a walk up the mountain, right?
Yeah.
And just to get lost. And for some reason, you're coming down this way with you're running with the dog, or you're walking with the dog.
I'm probably walking. I don't run much. Unless something's chasing me.
Which could happen up there.
That's true.
I'm always thinking mountain lions or bears.
I don't know. I hope not. I did run into a cougar, but that's another story. But not there.
Okay.
Never there. Just so you know, I will never go back. It was at Doris Ranch, so scary.
Well, that's close enough.
I know. Well, it's on the opposite side, but it was scary as ever. Anyway.
So I ran into you, and I said, hey, our dogs actually met.
Yeah.
and therefore we were forced to meet.
Yes.
Right? So in the awkwardness, hey, how's it going?
Yeah.
What are you doing up here? And all this kind of stuff. And as we started talking, it was like, you said just what I needed. And then when you text me his thing, and I watched it the next morning. I waited till the next morning, and I watched it, and I'm going, it was the most meaningful thing that I've seen in a long time. I was really crying during that, and it was because I realized that I can stop this.
Yeah.
I can stop my own reactions.
Yeah.
That are negative. And the negative reactions are hurting me personally. I'm hardest on myself. So if I'm responsible for my pain and my negative emotions, what set that off? And I found out that this is a pattern, I think, that began with my father. I had an older sister, 2 years older, and she was cuddled and held and caressed and treated like a little girl.
Yeah.
I came along and I didn't get the same thing.
But you're aware of it.
Yes, I'm aware of it, yes. And I'm watching and I'm seeing I'm not getting treated the same. And I'm getting hit more, spanked more. My dad believed in corporal punishment.
Sure.
Because I'm a boy, I'm more active. I get into trouble more. One of the biggest whippings I got was slipping in a puddle and getting my shoe tip wet. And it was church shoes. And so my dad said, don't get those wet, whatever you do. And I'm out playing and I slipped in the puddle and I got my shoes, and I just thought, I am a little dry before I get in there, and I'm not going to worry about it. When he saw that, I got a whipping, and it was a bad whipping. And I felt injustice. This is not just. Again, I thought, I'm not good enough to please my father, even when I'm trying to be good.
Yeah.
Never good enough. And it just kept going from there. It was like, I won a fire poster contest in the district, and when I was in the first grade, it didn't work out. I didn't feel he was proud of me because I actually threw up at the banquet because I ate something that didn't agree with me, and it was embarrassment.
Yeah.
So again, that was a failure. Yeah. It just happened over and over. So I was trying to please my dad. He was state champion wrestler. I became a state champion wrestler later because I was trying to mimic him and please him.
Yes.
In the area that he was good at.
Because we as children, we need that reassurance.
Yes.
We need to know that we're loved, that we're accepted. We seek that. So you're creating strategies to be the perfect kid in order to receive love. Trying to, right? And
realizing you just can't live up to it. And even when you do well, it's not good enough.
Yeah.
So it was just this pattern that I saw, and I recognized through his techniques and the way he was showing everybody that they always chose the worst possible thing that could happen to them as their truth.
Yeah, from Dr. Mate's thing, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And as I realized that, I'm going, wow, this is transformational if I can now just pay attention.
Yeah.
See when that happens and change course, change my reaction.
It's so amazing, right?
Yeah.
Well, just for anybody who hasn't seen that video, he really goes up to anybody in the audience who's willing to share a part of their story, and he'll ask them a deep question, about why do you think that way, or what happened, and he asks like the right questions, number one. So being in the presence of people who know how to ask the right questions and who know how to hold that safetyness for you. Because it's hard when you're trying to really dive into that to go, well, I don't know why I'm reacting that way. And then when you find that reaction, it can be very hard and difficult and painful.
Yes.
But it's also empowering. And as you were talking about, it's pattern behavior. So our brains in general gear towards the negativity. That's just how it is. And when you have 20 experiences and 10 of them are negative, your brain will not even focus on the positive. So the work right now is, as you were saying, you've recognized it, and in order for you to shift that, it's a rewiring of the brain. So it's not easy. It's not easy,
and it's not instantaneous, and you're not always good at it. So because you're not used to it, you're making mistakes, and you're successful on one side in recognizing it and stopping it and changing your reaction, but the next time you're not so successful, so you don't feel like you got it down. So it's a matter of just time and getting into a habit, a new habit, and replace an old bad habit with a good habit is different and harder, but it's the only thing that'll work. You can't replace a bad habit with a bad habit, or you don't go anywhere, or go into a deeper hole.
Well, and talk about bad habits for a minute, because Dr. Mate talks a lot about, addictions and all of those things. Bad habits we create are most likely coping strategies. And if we look like trauma or experiences that are difficult, it's not about the experience that we've had. It's about our internal experience. It's about what our nervous system does. It's about, the cortisol that gets released, or all of those things. So our bodies are seeking calm. I mean, that's why people at times who, seek addictions of any kind, it doesn't just have to be what we vilify, I mean, addictions could be going to the gym, 2 hours a day, 7 days a week. I mean, you can have a good addiction, but it's still like, what are you trying to treat? What's the underlying thing? So it's like our bodies seek that calmness.
Yes. And we resist it. We're our own worst enemies. And so once you recognize that, it becomes like a cascading effect. And you're starting to see a lot of other things that you can relate to and see things from a different perspective. As you see things from a different perspective, you don't take everything so seriously. You have to be impeccable with your words and how you describe something. And don't be a party to gossip or anything negative. So everything you say should be meaningful, should be truthful, as well as you can think of it, and should have integrity, meaning that you're just trying to find truth and love. You're speaking with truth and love. You're not speaking out of anger or resentment or jealousy or any of the negative emotions. That's a goal, and it's hard to do all the time consistently. But the more you do it, the easier it gets.
Those negative emotions are messengers.
Yes.
They really are. So, I mean, we say negative emotions, but their emotions are just it. But they're messengers.
It alerts you to what's wrong and what are you feeling. So now change that feeling. You have the ability to change that.
Or dig in deep and figure out why you're feeling it. I mean, if you're really going to become self-aware, I mean, and it's hard, so I encourage anybody who's doing that work to reach out, whether it's, if you want to reach out to me as a peer support, please do, but reach out to somebody, because it can be really difficult, but it's really hard when you start to dive into those, asking those questions like, wait a minute, why am I so angry? What's going on? Anger is a secondary emotion. So what's underlining the anger? Is it fear? It's like there's something going on.
It's always based on fear or some negativity, and it's always taking the lower road, not the higher road. And taking the higher road is not easy to do all the time, but you're always thinking in terms of what's in the best interest of the most people, and it's not selfish. It's always directed towards what makes other people happier or better, and yet not contradicting who you are. So you have to be truthful to yourself and honest with yourself, and we're all painting a picture of our lives. We're painting our own picture of how we think of ourselves or want to be remembered as we live our life. It's like our own painting. It's unique. There's no other person on earth that has your experiences or your feelings, or we all have the same feelings, but they're triggered by different things at different times based on culture and indoctrination and on and on. Which is a negative. It's not a positive. It doesn't come from a place of love. It comes from a place of fear. And anytime you're afraid of something, you're not good because you're afraid of going to hell. You're not good because you want to go to heaven. You're good just because you want to be good.
The innate part of it.
It's your intention that matters more than anything else. And I think we lose sight of that when we're so domesticated into what culture says, this is truth, this is truth. Only 95%, probably 95% of all the things that we have been told are true are not true.
They're scripts that have been passed down in generations.
That's right, and they're false scripts because they're from people's own dramas in their own lives and their own pains and aches and traumas throughout life.
Yeah.
So to me, it's like that makes me aware.
Yeah.
And as I'm aware, I'm enjoying life so much more. I want to get out. I want to be more sociable. I want to meet more people. I'm talking to you. I initiate conversations that I didn't before because I have time to. And if someone takes the time to stop and listen and talk to me, we have a mutual interest.
Yeah.
Like you and I.
Yeah.
We had a mutual thing that, hey, this sounds true to me. And this sounds true to you. Maybe we have something in common. We should not just say bye, see you sometime, or never see you.
Yeah. Well, people do that so often.
Yeah.
We're taught to be surface. And what I hear you saying and what I'm taking from it is that your ability to have connection is deeper. And the desire to have connection is deeper. And that's just I love connection because it thrills me.
People feel they need to be connected and they're always trying to please others or themselves. And they either feel like they're failures or they feel like their success is based on that. Not based on who they are really.
Yeah.
And expressing that. But more in lines of my mom wanted me to be a doctor and I'm a doctor. So I pleased her.
Yeah.
Well, am I the right kind of doctor? Is that really my wish? Or was it just to please her? I don't know. I think it's a little both. I'm just saying that I go down my road because I was influenced by people that took me down there.
Yeah.
I would never have been a chiropractor without my first wife's father, who sent me to dental technology school, and then I became a chiropractor after that. Both were initiated by him.
Yeah.
So people that come into your life have a big impact on you, and you don't even, before I actually said that statement to you, I was really not so aware of that.
Well, because we talked about it, we drop our authenticity. So we're most of us, not all of us, but most people are walking the path of life according to what everybody else is telling them to do. Mm-hmm. You're on autopilot. That's why I lived my life on autopilot. And when I started to do my own self-awareness work is when I started to find my power. Mm-hmm. It's when I started to say no. It's when I learned boundaries. And it's when I started to go, what is it that I want? And it's so empowering. I think this is almost up. Let's end this here, but we're going to continue our conversation because it's really good. But as I'm learning my camera, it's 29 minutes and it'll shut off. So I'm trying to learn how to do that beautifully. So Curt, thank you for joining me on this. We're going to stay tuned. I'm going to put a pause here and we will continue the conversation. But
sounds good.
Thank you for coming to Coffee Talk this week. And next week, the second half with Curt will be posted. So cheers. Mm-hmm.